Welcome to YogiViews, where my guest is yoga itself, through interviewing those who practice it, teach it, sell it, or simply love it. I am Antonio Sauces. Far from the modern styles of yoga, the branches of yoga all address the integration of all existing things, each one in a particular way. While the best known branch of yoga in the West is Hatha Yoga, or the yoga of the body, the well-known asanas, there is another branch not so well known for its core principles, but for one of its techniques. I refer to Bhakti Yoga, or devotional yoga, that addresses unity by fostering loving devotion. One of the ways in which we can accomplish this is through the practice of Kirtan, a Sanskrit word that literally means to repeat, and is a call and response chanting, usually the name of God. One of the first proponents of this form was Swami Paramahansa Yogananda, who in 1923 sang Kirtan at Carnegie Hall, followed by 3,000 people. Later on in the 60s, Swami Prabhupada founded the Krishna movement, inviting his devotees to sing the Hare Krishna mantra at ashrams, temples, but also at squares and even train stations, where you might have seen them dressed in orange and giving away copies of the Bhagavad Gita. In recent years, the practice of Kirtan has become even more popular, especially in pop yoga culture, being one of its greatest exponents, someone who not only is my neighbor, but also I have here at the studio today, Jai Uttal. Welcome, Jai.
Thank you, Antonio.
Jai Uttal is a pioneer in the world music community. His eclectic East meets West sound has put him and his music at the forefront of the world fusion movement. His musical roots embrace a variety of traditions and cultures that span the globe and the centuries. And he has produced an important number of CDs that are today considered classics. Jai.
Antonio.
Jai. I'd like to start with a question that intrigues myself and most of our viewers. How did you meet yoga the first time? What was your first experience with yoga?
Oh, wow. My first experience with yoga, I think I was probably 11 or 12. My parents had a yoga teacher in New York City. They I don't know, I don't really remember how this happened, but they hooked up with an Indian Swami. And they went to his apartment, which I think was on Park Avenue, somewhere really, really upscale in Manhattan. We lived in Manhattan. And they had yoga classes and Indian cooking classes. So they took me to meet him one day, and I thought it was pretty funny, actually. But I liked the food, and that was about it. It was a little fad that my parents were into. As far as when did I, meet it in a real heart-to-heart way, I remember, I think I was maybe around 14 or 15, going into some travel agency and seeing a poster. Well, it was actually Afghanistan. It was a travel poster for Afghanistan. But it showed a bunch of guys walking on a mountain trail, and they had long turbans on. And it was like this awakened this memory in me and this longing, this incredible longing. And I said, I have to go there. But it wasn't like I had to go there. It was like, that's me. What am I doing here? That's me. And that's not exactly yoga, I guess, but it's a connection to this ancient Indian place. And then after a bit, I met the Hare Krishnas in New York City, and I wasn't drawn to joining the movement, but I loved the chanting. I just loved it right away. And then I started reading books, Autobiography of a Yogi, great famous books, and gradually getting into it. So I was a teenager. I was in New York City. I didn't come to the West Coast till 1969, I think. So it was before that.
So your actual personal practice, let's say, started with chanting.
Yeah,
Started with
yeah.
Kirtan.
It started with Kirtan, and it stays with Kirtan, and it continues with Kirtan. I have entered a little, through the years, a little practice of Hatha Yoga. I actually was quite into it when I was about 19 or 20. Then I totally stopped for many, many, many years. And 10 years ago, I met my soulmate. You know, even now I find myself stumbling over those words because I never believed in such a thing until I met Nubia. And she's a yoga teacher, and she is... I should be doing a lot of Hatha Yoga, but I'm doing a little Hatha Yoga through the grace of my wife Nubia. And not because I love it, because I need it. But the chanting and japa, mantra, has been so constant through all the years. Through
all the years.
Yeah.
Before we go into the topic itself, the mantras and kirtan, kirtan is part of Bhakti Yoga in many ways. And I understand that it's a type of yoga that you like, that you somehow appreciate.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about Bhakti Yoga.
Okay. Well, I should preface it by saying that these subjects, you know, I am not a scholar. I'm not a master of anything. I can barely get out of bed in the morning. But I have, you know, spent many years of my life exploring these things. So I can just share my experiences and my thoughts, and nothing that I say is a definitive answer. Bhakti Yoga, we translate it as devotional yoga. But I find that the word devotion is a little open to interpretation. Because in the West, you know, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, devotion means a particular thing. In the Eastern Vedic tradition, it's much bigger. Devotion, bhakti in India, means every emotion, every feeling of the human heart, every mood, no matter what it is, not just the spiritual ones, but every mood is directed toward the Spirit, toward God, toward that one who is closer to us than anything. And Bhakti Yoga is the path of finding a personal, intimate relationship with God, or goddess, or light, or, you know, however you word it, but with that one, where it's not an abstract thing, but it's a human. It's so human. Bhakti Yoga is so human. But we're saying that the closest friend or the closest beloved that we have is God, and doing everything we can to nurture and nourish that personal relationship.
It is also said that God's love for us is unconditional and different from the love between us humans, that I love you, but if you're too late more times than enough, then I don't know if you know how it is. Is part of Bhakti Yoga trying to practice this unconditional love so we can somehow mirror and meet God in the same way He loves us?
Well, I haven't really figured out how to practice unconditional love because my being is so conditioned and conditional. But I think we can practice kindness, and we can practice just being good to each other. Now, my guru, whose name is Neem Karoli Baba, he said, the only thing that's important is how much you love God. And then somebody asked him, well, what's the best form of God to offer this love to? And Maharaji, which is what we called him, said, the best form to worship God, the best form to love God is every form. So, you know, I wish I could turn on a switch of unconditional love. I don't know how, but I do know when I see myself being conditional in my love. Well, on one hand, I say, okay, I'm human. You know, I'm only doing the best I can do. But on the other hand, I look at it and say, wow, look at those conditions. Or as you said, this person is late. I'm going to let this person's lateness close my heart. Well, sometimes it does, and those are the times that you don't catch it, right? But through practice, we can sort of try to see what's important, you know, and obviously the really deep loving and caring is more important than getting someplace on time. but yeah, you know, it's a process, and
Yes.
it's a long road that we're all stumbling on.
Yes, yes. Now it is said that definitely the loving God or going into Bhakti Yoga has deep spiritual influence or effects on one's own path or growth, path of growth. Do you think so? How so? How does Bhakti Yoga help us grow spiritually?
Well, you're asking me a question as if I'm a person who has grown spiritually, so I can't.
You have grown some,
Well,
haven't you?
I've grown older and older and older, but
No, older spiritually. I mean, you have grown spiritually, haven't you?
we'll say we hope so. One thing about bhakti is we gradually become a human being who leads with their heart. You know, not to say that the mind and the intellect is wrong or is useless. Of course, that's not true, but that our heart and our feeling self and and the next step being our intuitive self and our soul self, we could say, I guess, you know, becomes the leader in our life. And I think as we practice kirtan, japa, mantra, and just the practice of surrender and offering to spirit, it more and more awakens the heart part of us. I find also, you know, like with kirtan singing, I am able to channel every emotion that's in me, whatever it might be in a given day, into this incredibly healing, productive, beautiful, creative force. Where if I'm not doing that, many of my emotions get kind of tied up, and I get, you know, I have trouble. You know, I get, I don't know the word, get caught.
You get caught.
And kirtan is a great processor, aid to processing all the internal emotions without necessarily labeling them or identifying them. But I can be singing, and sometimes I feel so beautifully, deeply loving space, you know. And other times I'm singing, and out of the blue, this massive anger comes. Who am I angry at? I don't know. Not necessarily anyone. But it just comes out in the song. And I always feel so clean afterwards, you know. And also, you know, I felt that I was like a asteroid flying through space with no direction. And when I met my guru, and when my guru directed me to the path of bhakti, I felt suddenly that this asteroid became a planet spinning around the sun. And, you know, it's not to say I didn't, and probably still do have tons of karma to work through, but still there was a reflection of that sun in my life. And, you know, maybe that's the biggest one. You know, I know I'm not alone. I know that I'm protected, and I know that I forget that all the time, but I know that despite my forgetting or remembering, the protection and the connection is still there.
Perhaps kirtan is a way of remembering.
Kirtan is totally a way of remembering.
What is kirtan? We are naming the word, and not everybody, number one, knows what kirtan is, because, you know, but what is kirtan?
Well, you know, I must say I don't have a definitive definition of kirtan, because I've heard so many, but I will describe what it actually is. It's a repetition in song, in music, of the many names of God in the Hindu tradition, God or goddess. We believe that these names are just another manifestation of the deities. It's not like, you know, my name is Jai, so if you call me, you say, hey Jai, I'll answer. It's that the names are actually another form of gods. So usually it's with a group, and it's in a call and response manner. It's not always, you know, and we sing beautiful melodies, or, you know, I mean, actually the melodies can be anything you want. the way I do it is I usually bring somewhat of the Indian tradition into the melodies, into the music, and my kirtans are very rhythmic and very upbeat, I guess you could say. But the mantras are really, 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 really ancient. And in kirtan, we sing them over and over and over and over and over again. Even though the music itself might be constantly changing, the words stay the same. And I encourage people, I encourage myself to not be inhibited about our voice, because in kirtan, there's no thing of a good singer and a bad singer. It's everybody is a soul, a human being with longing to connect to God. And everybody's voice is the perfect voice that God gave them. And everybody's mood is the perfect mood. It might not feel like the perfect mood, but it is. It's the place from which our prayer is born. And we sing and sing and sing and sing and sing. I love, actually I said it's usually done in groups, but I also really love singing by myself, singing kirtan. There's a very deep intimacy that happens when you're just singing these songs alone. But then when you're with a group, it's really wonderful because everybody's energy feeds everybody, and everybody's passion feeds everybody, and it's it can be a very, very beautiful experience.
In the sense that kirtans, some of the kirtans chant the name of God, in a way what you're doing is actually connecting, putting the name of God in your mind, so the mind is not going to other places and it's staying within the repetition, so you're connecting with God. When you were talking about the each person's voice is perfect, it's unique also.
Yes.
So I was just thinking that it's a perfect way of connecting your own uniqueness with the source or with God.
Yeah. Totally.
Now,
so.
How does kirtan work from a spiritual standpoint?
Oh, you mean like how does it work? Why does it work? Well, I'll say a few things, but I think that why kirtan works and how does it work, that question it takes us into the realm of mystery, and not magic. I don't mean like magic like hat tricks, but the divine magic that we can't really understand. But that being said, there's many levels. One is the repetition, and pretty much, as far as I know, I should say many meditative practices from every tradition involve repetition. And it's just like what you said. As we repeat and repeat and repeat, the power, the like controlling power of our mind that's constantly making us crazy, it just kind of, and it doesn't shut off, but it just moves to a different seat.
Yes, the brain masks it.
Yeah,
Would you say that?
It just it lets go of control, the mind, and then what happens? What's left? The heart is left, and the body is left, and so they begin to become enlightened. I don't mean enlightened, I mean they have more light, the heart and the body, and meanwhile we're breathing, deeply breathing, deeply breathing. We're not trying to do breathing exercises, but we're singing, and excuse me. And when we sing, our breath is amplified, and that is a very excuse me. When that happens, we open more and more and more. And then there's the simple element of singing. When we sing, whatever we're singing, whether we're singing rock and roll songs, when we're singing, some of our shields just naturally drop away because a voice is so primal to our source and our soul. So we become more vulnerable and we become more emotional. And I shouldn't say we become more emotional, but we enter a world of our own emotions that we normally don't enter. So this whole emotional body that hides within us becomes awakened and expressed. And that leads to all different kinds of things. And when I'm singing, I some people say, oh, they get so blissed out when they're singing. I don't necessarily feel blissed out. I don't know what that means exactly, but I always feel deeply, deeply, deeply connected internally to this place of wholeness and this place of surrender and longing, asking, begging the spirit to pay attention to me, to come to me, to like hold me in its loving arms. And that's when we get into the mystery. You know, how do these practices work? How does yoga work? Why does japa, repetition of mantras, work? You know, there's a lot of theories and we can talk about them, but I do believe that they open the door to grace, and that there is an element of blessing that comes to us because God is very loving.
You were mentioning japa, or the practice of the repetition of mantras, as perhaps slightly different from kirtan.
Yes, it's, you know, they kind of go hand in hand.
Yes.
A lot of people these days are very interested in kirtan and less interested in japa, and I always encourage people about japa because I think it's wonderful. And what it simply means is taking the mantras that we sing. Generally, people will pick one of the mantras. Like through an evening of kirtan, some people will sing many mantras. Myself, I like kirtans to be really long, so I'll maybe do 3 or 4 in a night. But in japa, I would pick one mantra. And, well, I picked one mantra, and I've been saying it for more than 45 years. So I've been saying it a long time. But the way we do it is we say it silently or whispered or quietly, and not necessarily sung. Some people do it silently, meditating on that mantra. I use beads a lot. I use japa beads, where each bead will be a repetition of the mantra. And, you know, sometimes I've heard it said that kirtan, we're singing out to God, and japa, we're quietly letting God answer us. You know, there's many ways to look at it, but it's still a practice of the heart, a practice of repetition, and a practice of prayer. I mean, all this is prayer. Really, it just becomes prayer that's a non-linear sort of prayer. It's not like, oh, God, please help me with my sciatica. It's just more like, God, 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 you know? Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily a linear prayer, but it's a heart prayer without you know, a linear content.
But even perhaps some of the prayers of other religions that still have a very specific meaning, but people, when they are saying Father that are in heaven, and they are not necessarily always thinking of the precise meaning of each word, but they are also kind of singing it and just repeating it. So totally. Do you find a similarity with mantra in other religions?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I do feel there's a similarity in the repetition. There's a total, I won't even say similarity, it's almost like the intention of connecting to God is the same. Mm-hmm. There's something about the Sanskrit that is also one of these mystical realms. Mm-hmm. You know, people say in the tradition that Sanskrit is a language that was channeled from the ancient sages, the ancient yogis, the like first primordial original yogis, as a language of transformation, of internal transformation, and that all the words of Sanskrit have inherent molecular transformative power. So I feel that. I would never, you know, proselytize it because, you know, I wouldn't. This is not who I am. But I've experienced that and feel that. So that's a whole other element to all of this. Like how and why and what. Well, I feel it to be so. And the teachings of the tradition say it is so. I leave it to each one of us to find that to be true for them or not. But to me, that's one difference with the prayers in English and other languages.
So even for us Westerners, you think that it's worth singing Sanskrit words even though we are not familiar with them, but they will still work at that molecular level?
I think so.
Yeah.
Of course, Kirtan and Bhakti is not necessarily for everyone. I would never say that it is. You know, each person, as we walk through our life, we are drawn to different expressions of the light. And you know, finding the expression of the light that is most true to our own heart, that's part of growing up, I guess, you know, part of maturing. We try different things. most of us, well, when you're my age, if you lived through the 60s and, all that, we all tried so many different things, and that's beautiful. But after a while, you begin to say, okay, what is it that's really awakening my insides? And for me, it is this Bhakti Kirtan mantra. Mm-hmm. But I would never, ever say that it is that for everyone.
Could you briefly tell us who is it for and who it is not for?
Oh, I can't tell you that. I would say anyone who is attracted to it should explore it. And if through exploring it, the feeling, the excitement, what's the word? The heart awakening that occurs through it, if that continues happening, then it's for you. I couldn't look at somebody and say, you should be silent meditator, you should be a singer. Mm-hmm. I could never say that. And if anybody ever said it to me, I'd walk the other direction.
But indeed, for example, the transcendental meditation assigns a specific mantra to each person. Yes. So some other techniques, disciplines do it. So
yes,
yeah.
Of course,
yeah.
Of course. But you asked me.
Yeah.
So I'd say
anyone
who's interested or attracted to the mantras and to the singing of the mantras should go to a kirtan or two or three, because everyone's kirtan is a little different, meaning that everyone who leads kirtan does it a little differently. And for example, my kirtan might not be for that person. That person might love it. That person might not. So, I would suggest to people to check out a few different kirtans and see. And then they might say, oh, okay, it's not for me. Or on the other hand, they might say, wow, I really want to explore this. And for those people, I say, explore it.
Yes. And who is it not for? Could you pinpoint who would not be a good thing to practice?
No, I couldn't. I really couldn't.
But you were saying earlier today that kirtan is not for everyone. So who do you think would not be so inclined to practicing kirtan? So it's not for them.
Well, the first thing that would come to my mind would be somebody who's really analytical and really mental in their approach to life and God. But then the second thought that comes to me is that, well, maybe that's the best person for kirtan to help pull them out of that space. I can't say. Mm-hmm. I can't say.
Could be. Now, some mantras have a very definite meaning, and some others don't. They are more sound cells, we would say. Do you find a difference, or do you find that the ones that have meaning are more powerful than the ones that don't, or for you they are the same?
Well, in kirtan, in the science of mantra, or you could say the yoga of mantra, there's so many mantras.
Yes.
And everything from mantras to awaken different chakras to mantras to defeat the 10-headed demon that comes to us when we pass the Saturn cycle. It gets really vast, and I bow to that. It's this is amazing.
Abundance.
Yeah. In kirtan, we don't sing all those mantras. We're very simple. We sing just the names, or I shouldn't say just the names. I should say 98% the names, and they all have a meaning, but they're simple meanings. They're names of, Durga, Krishna, Rama, whoever.
Mm-hmm. If our viewers want to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Simply go to my website, which is Jai Uttal. That's JAIUTTAL.com.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is great. I appreciate very much you having come here today and shared your knowledge and your experience with us. And I also want to thank you in the name of yoga for bringing back some of that heartfelt spirituality that we believe sometimes is missing here. And I hope to have you some other time in the show again.
Thanks, Antonio. It's amazing that we've passed each other on the street for years and years and years. We never really get together, and now here we are getting together with all the people
with
that are
everybody
watching.
in the world. Well, good.
Great.
So thanks for sharing this with us. This was Jai Uttal. Jai Uttal is a pioneer in the world music community. His eclectic East meets West sound has put him at the forefront, and his music as well as at the forefront of the world fusion movement. His musical roots embrace a number of different traditions and cultures that span the globe and the centuries, and he has produced many CDs, some of which are today considered classics. So I hope you enjoy our show today. If you want to say something to me, please shoot me an email at antonio@yogiviews.com, and I look forward to seeing you the next time.